Hello, everyone, and welcome to our special holiday edition of Sturgeon Moon Poetry. It's good to have all of you with us. Sturgeon Moon Poetry, if you don't know, is now a monthly venue for reading poetry. And while we welcome all kinds of poetry, we do give special emphasis to lyrical narrative poetry. And today will be just a little bit different because we have two featured readers that write a lot of lyrical poetry. There is some narrative in them, but a lot of lyricism in their poetry. So this will be a little bit of a breath of fresh air for some of us, and I'm very, very excited to introduce our readers for today. So with no further ado, and I'm Terry Lucas. If you haven't met me, I'm the founder and curator of Sturgeon Moon Poetry and Terry Lucas Poetry Coach, and many of you I have worked with and know, and really appreciate your attending today. So with no further ado, I would like to introduce our first featured reader, and that is Maryam Hiradfar. And Maryam's first poetry collection marked a milestone in her artistic journey. The title was Roadside, and she invited readers into her world through her verses and camera lens, offering an intimate glimpse of her perspective. Maryam embarks on a new chapter with her latest creation, Shards of Time, published by Saint Julian Press, 2023. And this collection marries minimalistic graphics with poems, crafting a mosaic of feelings and moments that transcend the boundaries of traditional expression. And hopefully, I think Maryam will show us some of those graphics today. And before she reads, I just want to let you know that I'll be putting up a link to my blog, thewindingspell.blogspot.com, where you can read my reviews of both Maryam's work and Ron Starbuck's work. So without any further ado, Maryam, would you please read for us?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Terry. That was a very kind introduction. And thank you, everyone, for joining. It's really exciting for me to share Shards of Time and some pieces from it with you. Just as Terry mentioned, I'm going to share my screen really quickly and put up some of the graphics for you guys. So Shards of Time is composed of 4 different sections or 4 chapters. The first one is called Torrents at Dawn. The second is Paralysis. The third is Buoyancy, and the fourth is Arrival. So each of these sections have graphics that I've designed for them, and every element of these sort of minimalistic graphics is supposed to convey a meaning. I'm not going to decompose every single element because that's going to take forever, but for instance, you will see stairs here that are supposed to represent ambitions and progress. You will see a graphic of a hourglass that is representing time. So just really quickly, this is the graphic for Torrents of Dawn. And Torrents at Dawn. This is the second one for Paralysis. The third one for Buoyancy, and the fourth one for Arrival. And I hope that as I read poems from each section, you will find sort of connections between the graphics and the poems. So the first poem that I want to read is called Entanglements. It's from Torrents at Dawn. Time has its cunning ways of twisting and turning your senses, burning what seems to be water and making iron flow like a river. I have been both. I have been water and iron. I have burned and I have flowed, yet today I am neither. Today I sit at the perfect intersection of doubt and of hope, of rising and of falling, of death and of rebirth. Yet just as nature demands that we reach for the surface when we are short of breath, my eyes reach for the light of that most distant star. Today, I dare myself to prove that improbable dreams combined don't become less probable, but that they beat in resonance, that they multiply. Today, I dare you, that most distant star, to do the same, sing with me, beat with me. And while I am as still as a stone, if reality grants its hand, I will be powder, I will be smoke, forever and forevermore. So that was Entanglements. And in Torrents at Dawn, I sort of wrestle with ideas about new dreams and new ambitions. You know, dawn is the beginning of the day. There is a lot of light to come. There is a lot of unseen yet to come. And Torrents is meant to represent the forcefulness of those feelings because in dreams, there can be a lot of fear as well. To dream big definitely scares every one of us, but that's the good thing about it. That also motivates us. Um, the second poem that I want to read is called The Flame. It's from the second section called Paralysis, and this is the graphic for paralysis. It is very short, so it will last probably just a couple of seconds. So I hope that you can bear with me for these couple of seconds. The Flame. Bring your hands close. Surround the thin body of the candle whose eyes sting the wind of time. Let yourself surround yourself and be assured that a breeze brightens the flame of a burning desire. So that was The Flame. And next, I'm going to read two poems from chapter Buoyancy. This is the graphic for Buoyancy. Both of them are related to the moon. And moon is really special to me. I love photographing it. I love looking at it. And it really, the special thing about it, which is kind of a trivial fact, is that once you look at the sky and you see the moon, you know that you're on the home planet, you're on Earth. And it might seem like a trivial fact, but for me, it has been really important because I immigrated from my home country of Iran to the United States about 10 years ago, and everything was different, everything was exciting, but it can be quite overwhelming as well to just be in the middle of change all the time. And so when I looked up at the moon every single night, that was the single kind of element that was always there. It was constant, and it would remind me that I'm on Earth no matter where I'm at. So it is something that connects us all. The first poem is called Gallery of Thoughts. Among the stretches of space, there is room for anything, for rings of smoke, for a valley, for sorrow, even for the young desire you have convinced yourself no infinity can keep. There is a gallery of thoughts floating on the moon, where nothing ever stirs and no wind ever blows, where thoughts just hang and unfurl for you to walk among and observe. And the second one is called the 14th. And the 14th is referring to the 14th day of the lunar cycle or the 14th of the lunar month. That is the full night moon. And that is actually also very special to me because during the pandemic, I was on the Galveston Island. It is a perfect place to be if you would like to photograph the moon, which is what I used to do on the 14th night of the lunar cycle every month. And if you have ever tried to do it yourself using a telephoto lens, you know that it's a very exciting experience, but it's also extremely fleeting because when the moon is right at the horizon, and when it's rising, it's moving extremely fast. And the moment that is perfect for photographing the moon, which is, when it's the largest size and also the luminosity is just right, it lasts only really a few tens of seconds, or about a minute or two. So you have to really be ready and capture that right photo. And the 14th, this poem, it talks about this fleeting nature of the moonrise. It is the 14th, moon hunter's evening. Horizon is bathed in lilac clouds and silk blue skies. Lingering, a thought may crack at any breath and rise up to the darkened heart of a black hole. To never be found again, to never rise or fall, but to hang still and to defeat the infinity of the slowing time. So that was the 14th. And now I would like to go back to chapter paralysis, which was the previous section. I'm going to read a poem called The Wall from this section. And The Wall is very different from pretty much all of the other poems in the book. It's very long. It's probably the longest poem that I've ever written. It's also extremely personal, and it's extremely vocal. My other poems tend to be a little more passive. And I was debating, actually, in the beginning, if I should include it or exclude it from the book, and eventually I thought that it should stay. And it's really about interpersonal relationships with anyone, with a partner, with a friend, with another human being on another side of the planet. The Wall. The door is closed, the curtains drawn. Particles glow in the beam of light that creeps into the lonely room. Our lonely room. The lonely room that has no tongue to speak its loneliness. Our lonely room that has no eyes to cry its emptiness. Our lonely room that stands brick by the force of the mortar that wants to scream from the pain of the weight of our heaviness, our bitterness, our simultaneous loneliness. The door is closed. The wall watches itself in the hollow eternity of the mirror. It watches its pale white body, the pale white body that encloses our bodies from time to time. It watches and gasps at its fantastic incapability to enclose our souls. It watches and gasps at the fantastic hypocrisy of its role to enclose and not enclose at the same time. To be a mask of togetherness, to be the weakest and sturdiest frame, to be the interior reflection of our exteriors. Only our exteriors. The exteriors that we choose for the sake of the wall, for the sake of the pale white wall, for it has to enclose something, and that something can only, of course, can only be our exteriors. Why, you might ask? First close the door, the white wall shall not hear what I'm about to say. Now we are safe, so you ask why. Because we fear that, God forbid, a human eye might see through the red, watery eyes of another. Because we fear that, God forbid, we will panic at the sight of such eternity that surpasses any wall, any lock, any chain. Because we fear that, God forbid, eternity would engulf us. Because we fear, my friend, we fear the eternity, the power, the love of our interiors. We fear the infinity of our smooth, calm human interiors. We fear the infinity of our human souls that can't possibly be enclosed. So we stare, and the throatless, tongueless white wall screams its heart out, and the mirror echoes the quiet shriek in the hollow shell of the room. My friend, now that we have heard the wall's plea, let us do it a favor. Tonight, when the moon comes out, we'll take a brush and a bucket of paint, pitch black, we'll cover every inch of its body, and we'll take it down kindly, brick by brick. Then we'll sit under the moonlight, with our eternal interiors watching the infinite, borderless universe that would not fit in that room that is no longer there. For we are, and we now can admit for the first time, humans, and the tired bricks rest in peace. So that was the wall. And now I would like to go to the final chapter of the book, which is called Arrival. And this is the graphic for Arrival. You kind of see again the graphic that I had in mind for time, the hourglass, represented in this circle that is supposed to kind of represent cycles and things that repeat in time. This last poem that I want to read is called Infinite Dunes. It was the favorite of my wonderful mentor, Kevin McGrath, who really helped me put this book together and who was my advocate, all throughout. He unfortunately passed away in November, but I would like to read this poem in memory of him. Infinite Dunes. In the presence of light, it is only light we can sing of. In its absence, its luminous memory. In the fleeting warmth of a candlelight, there's only a few tales to read. In the hushed light, thousands untold to whisper. In every grain of sand that falls, only a few glances to exchange. In the broken hourglass, dunes of them to long for. We are bound momentarily, as grains blowing on the wind, as tales exchanged, as glances merged. In time we shimmer until the hourglass breaks. And forever now, we are infinite dunes. So that was it for now. That was all that I had chosen to read. Thank you for listening. It was wonderful to share it for the first time publicly. I hope you enjoyed. And I also want to say thank you to both Ron and Terry, who have been just wonderful and so patient throughout this process with me. Especially Ron, who is just wonderful and has so much knowledge in terms of just editing a book and layout and the world of poetry itself, and has helped me a great deal. So thank you, Ron, and thank you, Terry, for this wonderful, wonderful gathering. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Maryam. Thank you very much for sharing some wonderful work from your book. And let's see, we have on chat a way to get to your book and find it and purchase it, correct?
I will just put that in the chat right now.
Okay,
I just
good.
wanted to make sure everyone is here. Thank you for
Excellent.
reminding me.
You bet. Very good. Thank you so much. And now we come to our second reader. I'm looking to see, yes, everyone, I've let everyone in a timely manner. I'm so happy with myself. Haven't left anyone hanging in the chat room. Okay, so our next reader, I have known for some time, Ron Starbuck. I would just say a couple of personal words about him before I read his bio. It took me 7 years to get basically my MFA manuscript published as my first full-length book. And that same year that it had already been accepted, it took me about 7 weeks to get my second full-length book published. And that was Dharma Rain that Ron Starbuck published through Saint Julian Press. And I'll never forget sending to him the manuscript. He said, yeah, it was like right after Thanksgiving, Ron, 2016. And he said, yeah, I should have an answer to you back in about a week or two. And I thought, a week or two? I've waited years for some presses, to get back to me. And I couldn't believe it. I thought, yeah, I'll probably never hear from him again, right? And sure enough, the first or second week in December, he said, well, I apologize. It's going to be the end of December before I can actually get back to you. It's the holiday season. And shortly after that, he gave me the word that, yes, he thought we could do something with the book and publish it. And he actually wanted to publish it before my book that had already been accepted. And I had to, slow him down a little bit. He really wanted to get rolling on it. So I published I had two books published the same year. And the second was Ron. But what I've watched over the past 8 years, I've watched Ron work with many, many poets to publish their work and mentor them and be with them all through the process in a way that I have not experienced with many editors at all. He is a wonderful human being to work with because he's a wonderful human being. And he's a wonderful editor to work with because he has published a lot of books. He's read a lot of books. He's very well educated and knows poetry very well. And he knows what might work for his press and what might not work. And I know some of you, on this call have had books published by him as well and know him well. So I just want to say a big thank you, Ron, to what you do for not only the poetry world, but for what you do through Saint Julian Press that is so different from so many presses in that you have started Saint Julian Press to have a dialogue between interfaith communities and poetry communities that might not otherwise experience or read or be aware of some of the kinds of work that you've published. And that's a rare thing today. So thank you very much for that. And Ron is a poet himself, a writer and publisher, CEO, executive editor of Saint Julian Press in Houston, Texas. Ron's 4 poetry collections are There Is Something About Being an Episcopalian, When Angels Are Born, Wheels Turning Inward, and most recently, A Pilgrimage of Churches, a mythic spiritual journey in verse and photos that crosses into the paths of many contemplative traditions. His work has appeared in numerous national and international publications, including Parabola Magazine, Tiferet, a journal of spiritual literature, The Criterion, an online international journal in English, The Enchanting Verses Literary Review, One, Pyrenees Fountain, Glass Lyre Press, La Piccoletta Barca, and the Tulane Review, among others. A collection of essays, poems, short stories, and audio recordings are available at the Saint Julian Press, Inc. website under Interconnections. Forming an independent literary press to work with emerging and established writers and poets and tendering new introductions in the world at large in the framework of an interfaith and cross-cultural literary dialogue has been a long-time dream of Ron's. And that has come to a reality. It's been a long-time dream of mine to hear him read at Saint Julian Press Poetry. So Ron, I turn it over to you, and I think you're going to show us some of your terrific photographs from your latest book, as well as read some pieces from that. So thank you, Ron Starbuck.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. And give me just a second to pull something up. Can everybody see this? And everybody can hear me. Maryam mentioned Kevin McGrath earlier, and Kevin ended up becoming a close friend of mine. We published 4 of his books. Before he passed away, he sent me an archive of all of his existing work, and we'll be publishing some more of it down the road as I probably work with his son or other members of his family. But there will be a new book that we will be publishing of his that we got out just before he passed away, called On Friendship, and that'll be coming out at the end of January. Earlier in May, we published a full collection of what he called his, I guess, his masterpiece or his final work called Fame, which is like 250 pages worth of poetry, which is a lot of poetry. But it was kind of a accumulation of his life. And I mentioned him because the story behind a pilgrimage of churches is that in 2018, my mother passed away. And before she passed away, we had conversations about what came next and what her preferences were. And I come from a family of 4 children, so her care was kind of my responsibility and my older sister. And in May of that year, things got so complicated with her that I went ahead and retired from my professional life and started, just working with her on her health care. And in October of that particular year, she passed away. But one of the things we talked about is that she wanted some of us to stay in connection with the community that she grew up in. And that community is a small Lutheran community of farmers in northeastern Kansas. And between the time she passed away and the time we had a memorial service for her, I just decided that I had enough of being stressed out or whatever, or I needed to do something to remember her by. So I got in my Jeep and I drove 800 miles north to northeastern Kansas. And I went to the church where she was baptized and confirmed, and where she and my father were married in 1948, and where her parents were married in 1920, and made a lot of reconnections with people there that I'm actually related to. And that started me on the idea of a pilgrimage of churches. And that journey lasted 3 years. And during that time period, I was doing photographs and I was writing poems. And a lot of the time I was sending copies of those poems to Kevin McGrath and say, what do you think of this? Or what do you think of that? And there was just this dialogue that we were going back and forth in dialogue almost every poem in the book. And so he was really, really helpful. And, that journey in and of itself was quite an experience. So I'm just going to show you some of the photographs from the book, and then I'm going to read a few of the poems. What you have to understand is at the end of the Civil War, there was a mass migration of people from Europe into the United States. And a lot of those people settled in the Great Plains of Kansas, Nebraska, Oklahoma, down into Texas. And they came from all different parts of Europe and Eastern Europe, Western Europe. It's just a long story, but they settled in small little towns, and they settled on farms because they could get land for free. That was part of the Homestead Act. So if you know your American history, you know about the Homestead Act. This is a photograph of a United Methodist Church in Natoma, Kansas. And the title of the poem is called Paradise Creek, and I'll say some more about that, but let me go ahead and I'm going to move to the next page, and I'm going to try and read this. Paradise Creek. And there's an epigraph here from Psalm 1. They are like trees planted by streams of water, bearing fruit in due season, with leaves that do not wither. Everything they do shall prosper. Once the tall grass prairie grew high along the banks of Paradise Creek, where the prairie waters offer a symphony of flowing songs running easy across wise stones that remember each rainfall, held gently and sonorous through lingering ages of earth and wind, where cottonwoods and willow compose dreams of the music arising in a chorus of new psalms, blessed by a landscape rich and abundant with white-tailed deer, beaver, antelope, elk, bison, coyote, roaming across wind-blown savannas, where an indigenous people, the Cheyenne and Arapaho, the Comanche and Kiowa, once hunted among hills and valleys throughout the southern plains for generations, before immigrant feet seeking their own liberation traveled westward across America, bringing Methodist, Presbyterian, Catholic, and Lutheran kin from afar to settle in this corner of the Smoky Hills. Arriving with the railway in the 1880s, they named Natoma, Kansas, after a Native American worker whose name means newborn. And so, An agricultural society of farms and ranches was given birth and rose beside stream and creek flowing into the Saline and Smoky Hill rivers, sculpting the vales and leaves and fertile tones of laurel, umber, and sienna, to merge with the Solomon and Republican rivers, enthralled to the Kaw River, in a fluid current down to the Big Muddy, then the vast Mississippi River, mother to a nation of builders, curving south toward Baton Rouge, New Orleans, and an ocean of blue promises and mirrored stars. This is another photograph of the Solomon River waterfall. It's in Minneapolis, Kansas, and most of you probably never heard of Minneapolis, Kansas. It's a small little town. It's actually north of Salina, Kansas, which is a little bit bigger town, but it's right there off of I-70 and about halfway between Kansas City and Hayes, Kansas. So it's out there in the high prairie. So this is a poem about the Solomon River waterfall. Give me just a second here. Solomon River waterfall, Psalm 126. Restore our fortunes, O Lord, like the watercourses of the Negev. Those who sowed with tears will reap with songs of joy. Before the prairie rains, before the prairie rains first fell to transform stream and brook to running rivers and deep waterfalls, before the curious wind caressed the tall grass prairie, before each hill and valley was sculpted in artistic curves no human hand could rival, where God looked upon this tender, sacred land, gathering light and shadow together to cast forth bright chiaroscuro dreams. As heirs and caring stewards, we could little imagine Earth's untouched innocence, the grace-filled splendor, where fluid landscapes drift amid wind-blown waves of blue-stem pastures, flowing over prairie rise and dell, where bison herds tread tall grasses gently to forage and renew the soil each solstice, healing the time-worn earth, gathering into one body each spring in a synchronous time, which brings forth newborn calves, revered each season in thanksgiving, in devotion and remembrance, a holy prayer celebrating creation and wonder, to unveil all we observe in a consciousness of faith, now fully revealed as the mirror image of God's immanence. I'm going to skip a few poems here, but I'll talk a little bit about the photographs. This is a small town called Simpson, Kansas, and this is a Union Pacific train depot that's been abandoned, and it was abandoned years and years ago. But the image of that just struck me. And in this particular spot, there's a small country restaurant that I had lunch at with a fourth cousin that we share a third great grandfather. And that's a whole nother story. This is another shot of American Methodist Episcopal Church in Nicodemus, Kansas. And Nicodemus, Kansas is has a Nicodemus National Historic Site. But the thing about it is that after the Civil War, ex-slaves from Kentucky that had been freed during the Civil War migrated to Nicodemus, Kansas to farm. And this is the African Methodist Episcopal Church that they started, and the National Park Service has come back and fully restored this particular church, and that's a photograph of the church. And this is the poem, Nicodemus Rises. I'm going to scroll down here a little bit more. This is the United States Center Chapel, and it's at the geographic center of the United States, or the lower 48 of the United States. And it's just a small little chapel that you can go and visit and pray at. But in 2020, during the Super Bowl, there was an advertisement by Jeep during the Super Bowl, and it was narrated by Bruce Springsteen. And they took us to this particular chapel and was talking about how we were so divided between urban areas and rural areas, and that there was a need to come together. And that's what this poem is about. I'm going to go ahead and read this. Beyond midwinter spring. Matthew 12. The good person brings good things out of a good treasure, and the evil person brings evil things out of an evil treasure. I tell you, on the day of judgment, you will have to give an account for every careless word you utter. For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. Beyond midwinter spring, when days are bright with sunlit hope, where solitary dreams become a single dream of America, a promise fulfilled, let us meet one another again without harsh words or brutal rhetoric, on this sacred ground, in prayerful accord. O America, attend our many voices. Let honored poets and storytellers speak across our history, spinning out verse after verse, story after story, binding us together as a faithful people. Reconcile us from our tragic rage and tyrannies of deceitful indifference. Let our cruelness wane, our enmities fade. Suspended in time between false and artificial discords, washed away, given a new vision, as Christ restored sight to one born blind, who made the deaf to hear and mute to speak, when he cried out, Ephphatha, be opened. Stir our numb spirits in a Pentecostal flame, burning away tired tongues and idioms. We bear this pain to know intimately that in our suffering, it is we, the people, in uncertain hours and broken foundations, who must redeem history from human folly and gain a unity within this blessed land where we are bound together as one. Out of many one, across prairies and plains, over great mountains and hidden valleys, flowing peacefully down streams and rivers, running in resounding harmony, in landscapes and people freed from our terrible, hurtful hesitations, to become no longer immigrant or stranger toward one another, to discover ourselves once more, returning to where we first arrived. This is St. John Lutheran Church. And in 1920, after returning from World War I, my grandfather married my grandmother at this church. In 1948, this is the same church where my parents were married. So it's got a long family history. This next poem is dedicated to that family history. It's called Saint John Lutheran Church. And I open it with these words from the Holy Eucharist Rite 1 of the Book of Common Prayer. Open, O Lord, the eyes of all people to behold thy gracious hand and all thy works, the rejoicing in thy whole creation, they may honor thee with their substance and be faithful stewards of thy bounty. Before a new generation became a bright thought within creation's dominion, blessing their ardent families, and impassioned gratefulness held fiercely in time's arch palms, trusted without measure or means, our kinfolk gathered together as a body of faithful believers to worship behind timber walls whitened with an intimate faith, an epiphany circling round the promised years that vanish across pastoral landscapes loved, adored beyond these Viridian hills, where a prairie wind brushes over the fluid sunlit wheat, whispering with an azure skies to transform an evening light, where celestial forms curve carringly over our many seasons and spells, past troubled rain, drought, cyclone, how a voice calls forth to life, treasured in the memory of all things revealed and hidden in the seen and unseen spaces of heaven, resting in creation, accepting here its lenience and respite from weariness as a loving kindness granted, an attendance unassuming, vivid as the moon's complexion, an emergent compassion arising, a luminous wisdom long desired, and a novel consciousness, balanced in serene holiness, a presence known across ages, in our remembrance given through grace hour by hour, heard as a silent chant, an angelic chorus intoned without chance or recess. We may not know we are even praying. I'm going to read one more poem, and maybe I'll have time to show you some of the other photographs. This is the family homestead, and this is the home my grandfather brought his bride, my grandmother, to in 1920 when they were married. And it was a brand new home at the time that they built, had no electricity. It's also the home where my mother was born. And in the background there, you'll see a barn. And this is a relatively recent photograph. I had to go back by there to get the photograph, but the people who live there now and farm the place were very gracious and let me take the photographs. So it's called Family Homestead. I'll read the epigraph first here. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High abides. Just a second. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High abides under the shadow of the Almighty. He shall say to the Lord, you are my refuge and my stronghold, my God in whom I put my trust. Today the prairie wind caresses curves upon an older face, recalling a quiet wonder. The scent of apples and hay returns a wistfulness well known, an imminent memory as Mnemosyne becomes our welcome guide. A gentle journey homeward, childhood's innocent hours cherished since our infancy. Seasons ripened with a wild imagination, rising limitless, so boundlessly assured of all things we revere on earth and in heaven, met and favored intuitively as we ran together beside smooth, fluent rivers, where cottonwood and elm reached toward heaven, playing hide and seek through honey-brushed fields of sun-ripened winter wheat, tasseled silken cornrows, where harvest hopes flourish on the surrounding glacial hills, softened by morning rain, dancing across blue ponds and flowing watercourses beside my grandparents' barn, red russet and flush with light, where sorrel Missouri mules once dwelled in dignity, prized warmly by my grandfather, created now for draft horses, leather, tack, and harness, broad-headed field collars, and sweet manure waiting to be cleaned with care from wooden stalls worn smooth across the years with age. In this remembrance of what was and will be once again, we have grown wise in life, drawn together in a youthful conspiracy of timely winds, breathing the same kind air. This is another photograph from Oldsburg, Kansas. It's just a bell tower at a church. And it's got the paint peeling and you can barely see the bell up there, but it was just an interesting photograph. And this is the inside of that old church. Another Methodist church in another town. This is a photograph of the Tallgrass Prairie National Preserve in the Flint Hills. Another photograph of the Tallgrass Prairie National Preserve. One more of the preserve. And these are actually two wild horses. And there are parts of the Flint Hills where they have resettled some of the wild horses of the West that run across a lot of the ranches there. I'm going to stop sharing. check on how we're doing on time. So Terry, I think that's it.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you so, so much. I'm overwhelmed with the presentation of yours as well as of Maryam's today. I think the combination of the imagery and the poetry is so effective, and I thank you for doing that and handling it very well. That's not an easy thing to do, and I know your book has many, many more photographs that you could show us, and the history, and many, many more poems, and Maryam is so as well. But you've given us a wonderful taste, and now what is our job to do is to buy your books, so we can read the rest of the poems and see the rest of the images. So be sure, Ron, and put up, as Maryam has, a way to get a hold of your books, a way to purchase them. We would love to do that. And I remind everyone that my reviews of both of your books are up on www.thewideningspell.com, thewideningspell.com. I will put that up here in a moment once our open mic readers begin. So you can read a review of your books. And also, thank you. Let's give them both another big thank you, a big round of applause. A wonderful treat today. Thank you very, very much. So I would just one or two announcements before we begin our open mic that I think everyone might be interested in here. So I didn't see Anne McCrary Sullivan. Is she here? Are you here, Anne? If you're here, unmute yourself and say, hi, I'm here. Okay. I know Joan is here. Hi, Joan. So next month, in January, our Sturgeon Moon poetry reading will be on January the 7th, and our two featured readers are Anne McCrary Sullivan, most recently the author of Notes from a Marine Biologist's Daughter by Saint Julian Press, and Joan Baranow, whose most recent book by Saint Julian is A Slight Thing, Happiness, but she has, I think she had 3 or 4 books published last year during her sabbatical, and I'm sure she'll probably be reading from multiple books. And that's on January this 27th, same time, Saturday afternoon, and you'll be getting more information about that. I also wanted to let everyone know that 3 of my reviews have been accepted by the Banyan Review. Tracy Rice Weber, my review of Tracy Rice Weber's review, Tools and Ornaments, will appear in the forthcoming winter issue of the Banyan Review. That's an online journal only, but it's a wonderful review founded by my colleague and good friend Tave Neese, and she is still the advisory editor right now of that review, even though it's been turned over to another editor by the name of Fatih D. And then Matt Byler, who's here, who featured last month, my review of his book, The Matrix, will appear in a later issue of the Banyan Review, as will Anne McCrary Sullivan's book, Notes from a Marine Biologist's Daughter, will appear later in the year. So I wanted to alert you to that. In case you try to find Matt's review or try to find Tracy Rice Weber's review, they're no longer on my blog. They will be on the Banyan Review. So I just wanted to make those announcements. And now it's time for our open mic, and I have a list. Yes, marvelous reading. Yes, Elizabeth, thank you. So I have a list of 8 readers here, and I'm going to call them basically in the order that everyone signed up in. And the first reader I'd like to call, and just a reminder of our guidelines for our open mic, only so we can move through with some expedition. I will introduce you, and you can just give the title of your poem and read the poem without any further ado. We'll save all the stories for when you feature, and there's not a person here in the open mic that someday won't be featuring in Sturgeon Moon. So first of all, I'd like to ask Dorothy Wall, are you still here? And if so, would you unmute your mic and please read a poem for us?
Thank you, Terry, and thank you to Ron and Maryam. I was really moved by both those readings. I'm going to read a poem from my book, Catalog of Surprises, which is just out from Blue Light Press. And big shout out to Blue Light Press for the work they do. This is called Dispatch from the 8th Decade. I've been subpoenaed, forced to account for the unaccountable, a mess on my desk, thinning hair and all my disbelief. Those young with their plump, their juice, their abandon, clattering through their lives, not a thought of contingency. Regarding sleep, it's a foreign tongue, indecipherable to those like me pacing these rooms, fortunate to have lasted, left to wait and wonder about the when and how of that other mystery. The sky shortens. The night dozes with its little restless animals, granted a stay.
Thank you very, very much, Dorothy, for reading that poem.
Thank you.
And I invite you, as well as any other of our open mic readers as you read, to please put in the chat a way to purchase your book if you have a book.
So Terry, I'm not adept at that, but my book, Catalog of Surprises, is on Amazon, as well as on my website, dorothywall.com.
Okay, great. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. Okay, and our next open mic reader is Joseph Sicardi. Joseph is a former poet laureate of Marin County, California. He has multiple books, and Joseph, I don't even know your latest book, so please read a poem for us. Unmute. You need to unmute. Go ahead, start over.
Yes, my book is called Songbirds of the Nine Rivers. It's published by 16 Rivers Press. And it's about the Tang Dynasty poets. So I will read one of my poems about them. You drink the dew of morning. The painting in the blue palace of 6 horses was so true to life that on a day as brief as daybreak's footprint in the east, only 5 horses remained. And the poets Du Fu and Li Bai, after drinking the morning dew from dew plates, etched poems about the 6th horse on sheer walls of granite, then washed their chisels in the yellow river and listened to their words murmur and drift away like forgetfulness, and watched the evening star rise over the blue mountains. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe. I appreciate your being here today and reading a poem for us. Next up, Matt Byler. Matt featured last month, and his latest book is Matrix from Saint Julian Press. What are you going to read for us today, Matt?
I am going to read from a book called Always Say Goodnight that was published almost 4 years ago and was published by Kaizo Flash. And I'll get started. This is a poem called More Things I Would Tell You, and it's dedicated to my daughter, Izzy. I join a bereavement group, but I last for 1 session. Marriages over 50 years, died suddenly, brain aneurysm, long battle with cancer. I am the only one who isn't crying. The only one. I don't know these people. What am I doing here? We go around the conference room, name tags, introduce ourselves. I last for 1 session. When it's my turn, I pull out a framed photograph of you. Colleagues in my office blew it up, framed it, placed it on my desk. Professional photo shoot for your work. Your high forehead, rouge cheeks, simple warm smile. Happen to have you in my bag. I can't look at you every day. It's the photo used in your obituary, in memorials and tributes. I had never seen it before, never seen it before. This was my wife, I say. This was my wife. I tell them my almost 17-year-old daughter, Izzy, attends summer school in Boston. She's doing well there. One of the elderly women in the group. Nobody calls me. I'm lonely. I need you people. I need this group. People shouldn't ask me what I need. They should just bring me food. I don't want to tell them, just do something. Do something. She points across the table at me. Your child is just a baby, and I have news for you. She is not okay. She is not okay. I am the only one who isn't crying. I don't want to sit here and cry with people I don't know. I want to learn how to cope, how to live, how to keep going. I can't look at you every day. I last for one session. I am taking you home. I have memorized your social security number, filled it out on countless forms, countless, mailed copies of your death certificate. I'm getting used to the new bicycle, which actually is used. I rode it around the park this morning. Pull-ups, push-ups, alternating V-ups, then photography in Manhattan. Keep going every day. Try to find a rhythm, a rhythm. I am in a paddle boat on a vast ocean, paddling, moving slowly, a vast ocean. I want to learn how to cope, how to live. I have memorized your social security number. I unwrap a framed collage of photos you had custom made for me, a recent anniversary. Don't you want to hang it? I went out of my way. I never did anything with it, never hung it. I unwrap a vast ocean, photos from our wedding 26 years ago, me cradling newborn Izzy, she on your lap as a toddler, you and me, our arms around each other so many times, a vast ocean. Early in our romance, you on my lap, a flowered dress, hugging me, hugging, caressing. I am taking you home. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matt. Good to hear your voice from another book, from another manuscript. Thank you. Okay, next we have another poet who attends a lot of our Sturgeon Moon poetry readings, Jan Fraser. Jan, read a poem, please. Are you here, Jan? Okay, she was traveling from South America.
Yeah.
You're here. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Unmute. Yes.
This is a poem that I'm hoping to include in a chapbook that I've been working on for a long time. Saving Face on Warburton Pike. I take the fork, meander into woods where sunlight rarely strays, past soaring matchsticks, brittle carpet strewn with logs. I recall 3 students from another culture, accused of cheating. We held space together hours, floundered in a fog of lies so thick, no soul would own the blame, nor risk to name another. Higher up at forest margin, hearts pump faster, red-tailed hawks swoop, dive. Wild freedom you can touch through slats of cyan sky and sea. Blazing light envelops wind and currents. Rows of gyres graze restless waves. Remorse hung heavy in that room. They left at last, returned to final time. Dispersed humiliation, one collective breath. The spiking totem rises, ridge trail carves a winding route. Timeless place where ravens, people spill their secrets. I wonder why we never knew that truth could carry us so far. There.
Thank you, Jan. Thank you very much. and welcome back. Okay, Shelley has a new book from just blanked, Shelley. The book is Come Back Behind Your Eyes, and the name of the press just left me. You have to say it.
Longship Press.
Thank you, Longship Press. I have a book published from them. I hope I hope our editor's not here. Good to see you. Read a poem for us.
Lonely dead man, erect in bed, in death dressed in lemony skin, like a marooned sun, stock still and bereft. Lunch tray cooled to desiccant jelly, nurse punching buttons to get him flat fast. Leave him be, snap his guests. The body changes, she explains. Rigor mortis comes smartly from a near folding chair. We want him like that, the better to visit, assert the newly bereaved, clustered heads. They rapidly set to grappling then, politics in the Garden of Eden, edifying me, the chaplain. I'm quizzical. Is the dead man entertained? What about him? I wonder aloud. What about his stories? I make my approach as if to ask. Sure, they murmur, ears cocked for the serpent instead, descrying his actual words that quarry for Eve's sin hanging in the balance. Well, well, I muse as I bless him, summon his still fresh affections from deep inside his rib space, the better to keep us company. How can I leave him so alone? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shelley. Good to hear you read again. And next is Jane still here? Jane McPherson? I think she may have left. Jane, are you here? If so, unmute yourself. I don't see you. Okay. All right. And I have Lalit Kumar. Lalit, are you here? I didn't see you come in. Okay. All right. I've asked Catherine Clark Sales to close this out, but I'm going to pull an audible here, Catherine. So Elizabeth, are you here? You're here, Elizabeth Cohen. I don't know if you agreed to read on the open mic, but I know you are a great Saint Julian Press poet and work with Ron closely. Would you read a poem for us? Is there a poem we can go on to the next reader while you look for one? Would you read a poem for us?
Terry, she stepped away. Oh, here she is. She's back. Okay,
Okay.
so now I ask her.
Okay, Elizabeth, would you? I'm pulling an audible here. I saw that you're here. Would you care to read a poem for our open mic? I can move on to Catherine while you get one. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not ready, but
Okay, that's all right.
Yeah.
Okay, next time.
I didn't sign up. Okay.
Next
Yeah,
time. Okay, really good. Just want to acknowledge that you're here and thank you for
thank
your presence.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, good. Then Catherine, I'm pulling another audible. I know Joan's here. Joan, are you here? I saw you come in. Since you're going to be featuring next month, would you care to read a poem? Putting people on the spot. I'll move on to I'll move on to Catherine while you find one. I'll let you close out. Okay. All right, great. All right. Sorry. You know, I'm in the holiday spirit here, just calling them as I see them. Joan came in a little late and I wanted to read a poem since some of you may not have heard her read, and she is featuring next month. So Catherine Clark Sales, would you now read your poem for us?
Okay, I'm going to read a poem that's out, and the Longship Press publishes Nostos, which is their journal that they do, and this is in the current edition. California adds a season. Spring still comes with fogs and days of rain, earlier every year with cheerful yellow, daffodils in February, forsythia, and redbuds follow, and little hands of red maple burst out on the official first day of spring. Roses in May and evening fogs roll down the hills gold with crispy grasp of August heat, season of drought, of careful hoses parceling out gallons for tomatoes and browning patches of lawn, guilt that there is lawn. And now comes fire season. season of smoky air, of ash, of bloody sky and missing sun, of choking air, of go bags packed by the door, of wind clashed wires and toppled trees, season of cough and choke, of sitting alone in hot, dark rooms as power fails and fans shut down, season of waiting to see what burns.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Catherine. And so now Joan is going to close out our open mic. Joan Barano is the founder, still teaches in the Dominican University low residency MFA program, has multiple books, and as I said, from Saint Julian Press, A Slight Thing, Happiness, and she is featuring with Anne McCrary Sullivan next month, January 27th, and you'll hear more about that. So Joan, would you close out our open mic today?
Sure, thank you. This is from A Slight Thing, Happiness, beautiful book that Ron published. So I'm going to read Truckee River Rafting. The least heart leaps at the sight of these giddy boats bouncing downstream. A carnival caravan carrying crews of Speedo-thonged and bikini-clad beauties, the season's image of summer's innocence. Go then, unlace your tennis shoes, wade through shallows. Your toes have never felt so exquisitely cold, and slip belly first into a buoyant dinghy. Someone will surely hoist you up, offer you a beer. You'll feel the snag and shudder as the raft regains its glide, and the shore with its sullen chores retreats. Now the sun unleashes its heat, the river flexes its muscles. As the boat begins to spin between banks of sage and sunflower, a girl with a Gibran tattoo inked lavishly across her chest, for love is sufficient unto love, invites you to steer through the afternoon's eternal blue.
Thank you very, very much, Joan. I love that "go then." That reminded me of Denise Levertoff's "Go then, much as that dog goes, each step an arrival." I just heard that in the rhythms as you were reading that. So a fitting poem for our final poem of the day. Go then. Have wonderful holidays, right? Read and write lots of poetry, and we'll see you next month. And let's give a big round of applause once again to our featured poets today, Maryam and Ron, and all of you. Applaud yourself for being here, for loving poetry, for writing poetry, and thank you so much for your attendance. Okay, great. Have a great holiday season. Have a great time, and we'll see you next month. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll have the recording up on YouTube here in a couple of days. I'll send out an announcement about it when it's up. Okay. Thanks a lot. Good seeing all of you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.